The gruesome story of Alexander Sawney Bean, whether true or not, would nonetheless go on to inspire the media for years to come. As it turns out, Sawney Bean is even behind the true story of The Hills Have Eyes, a horror cult classic. Some assert that Sawney Bean was a real person, while others consider him a mythical figure. The story is a tale of real horror. Sawney Bean, Scotland's most famous cannibal. The head of a 45-member clan in Scotland, Sawney Bean allegedly killed and cannibalized over 1,000 victims in the early 16th century. But did he even exist? Little is known for certain about his early life. However, Sawney Bean is believed to have been born in East Lothian in the late 15th century and was a tanner by trade. The latter part of his life is a little better documented following his relocation across the country to Ayrshire and his marriage. The newlywed Mr. and Mrs. Sawney Bean set up home at Benane Cave by Ballantrae in Ayrshire, Scotland. Benane Cave was rather an imposing abode, with tunnels penetrating the solid rock and extending for more than a mile in length. In addition, the accommodation featured lots of side passages where a young couple could extend into and convert over the next 25 years to accommodate a growing family. The cave's entrance was flooded for several hundred meters, twice a day at high tide. A nice drought exclusion feature. Lacking a trade, it was Sawney's plan to support his new wife on the proceeds of robbery. It proved a simple enough matter to ambush travelers on the lonely, narrow roads that connected the villages of the area. Then it dawned on him that in order to help make sure that he could never be identified for his crimes, he should murder his victims, to avoid those unnecessary visits to the shops for provisions, whilst at the same time disposing of any evidence. He came up with the bright idea of butchering the bodies to provide a high-protein diet of human meat for himself and his wife. The high-protein diet seemed to have been effective as Mrs. Bean began to produce little baby beans. 14 little beanie babies in total, each with a very unhealthy appetite for human flesh. As the beanie babies grew up and in turn, through incest, produced beanie babies of their own, their cooking pots increased in size dramatically. Over 2 decades, generations of beanie babies grew up in Benane Cave, refining their skills of murder and cannibal cuisine, including the now lost art of salting and pickling the flesh. Finds of curiously preserved but decaying body parts were discovered washed up on the surrounding beaches in the area. The local authorities had by now established what must have been, and what must still be to this date, the longest missing persons list ever produced. Although mass searches of the area were carried out in order to locate either the missing people or their murderers, nobody ever thought to search the depths of Benane Cave. As the years went by, the family grew older, and thanks to their high-protein diet, got bigger. And as the family grew, so did their appetite. As many as half a dozen victims would be ambushed and killed at a time in military-style operations by the Sawney Bean Army. The bodies were taken back to the cave to be carefully prepared for the larder by the women folk. Even in the best-planned operations, however, things sometimes go wrong. It happened one evening for the Sawney Bean Army, when they attacked a man and his wife as they were returning home from a nearby fair. One group pulled the woman from her horse and had her stripped and disemboweled before the other group had a chance to wrestle the man to the ground. Realizing the fate that was about to fall him, he fought desperately to escape, driving his horse into and over his attackers. As he fought for his life, a group of 20 or so people also returning from the fair happened upon the scene. After a brief and violent exchange, the Sawney Bean Army found itself, for the first time ever, at a numerical disadvantage and promptly retreated back to the cave to consider this situation. As they retreated, they left behind the mutilated body of a woman as evidence, a score of witnesses and one very angry husband. The man was taken before the Chief Magistrate of Glasgow, who, after hearing the tale and putting this together with his longest missing persons list ever and the many reports of the mysterious pickled body parts, decided to take the matter straight to the top. King James V promptly arrived in Ayrshire with a small army of 400 men and a pack of tracker dogs, and together with a band of local volunteers, launched one of the biggest manhunts the country had ever seen. Like before, the search extended through the Ayrshire countryside and coastline, and like before, nothing was discovered. That was, however, until the dogs picked up the scent of decaying human flesh whilst passing a partly waterlogged cave. The manhunt was closing in. By torchlight, the troops entered Benane Cave, and with swords drawn, They proceeded down the mile-long twisting passage to the inner depths of the Sawney Bean family lair. Nothing could have prepared them for the sight they witnessed that day. The damp walls of the cave were strewn with row upon row of human limbs and body parts, like meat hanging in a butcher's shop. Other areas of the cave stored bundles of clothing, piles of watches and rings, and heaps of discarded bones from previous feasts. After a brief fight, the entire Sawney Bean family, all 48 of them, were arrested and marched off to Edinburgh by the king himself. Their crimes were considered so heinous that the normal justice system, for which Scotland is so renowned, was abandoned, and the entire family were sentenced to death. The following day, the 27 men of the family met a fate similar to that of many of their victims, by having their legs and arms cut off and being left to slowly bleed to death, watched by their women. The 21 women were burned like witches in huge fires. Besides a story of Bean from 1755, there are no contemporary records to verify his existence. There are also no records of the missing persons, the various innkeepers forced to abandon their trades, or even the 400-person manhunt led by the King of Scotland himself. Indeed, Yeoman asserted that if the king had led a charge to dispose of a family of cannibalistic Scots hiding in a cave, there most certainly would be a record of it. So where did this legend originate? Some historians, including Yeoman, contend that it was simply an English propaganda tool. It sounds like the plot for a box office-topping horror film, and that's because it was invented to serve a very similar purpose: to sell books, Yeoman said. It also has a more sinister subtext. The books it sold were published not in Scotland, but in England, at a time when there was widespread prejudice against Scots. Yeoman said that the English media often portrayed the Scottish as sinister barbarians during the late 17th and early 18th centuries because the Scots were trying to reinstate one of their own on the British throne. In an effort to disenfranchise their cause, such stories were passed along. And the name Sawney was actually a term used to describe a cartoonish Scottish character. It's like calling a cartoon Irishman Paddy. The Sawney story was a dig at Scots, a people so barbarous they could produce a monster like Sawney, who lived in a cave and ate people. And that's the chilling tale of Sawney Bean and his gruesome clan. If you enjoyed this dive into Scotland's dark history, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more eerie legends and historical mysteries. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Let us know in the comments which legend you'd like us to explore next. You may also want to watch The Teacher and the Stolen Watch and Queen of Shadows. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the truth is stranger and scarier than fiction. See you in the next video.